cannot weigh your opponent when a guy comes in the street and tries to mug you.
Well, I mean, you could, but it might get a little awkward. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. It is I, the J-Shot, and this is A History of Caged Violence, the web series that shines a light on the dark days of MMA. Today, we're going to continue to chronologically make our way through the UFC's early catalog, this time with UFC 8, entitled David versus Goliath. Yes, it's an entire fight card pitting smaller fighters against gigantic ones. And admit it, that is enough to get your attention. You're intrigued, I'm on board, let's get after it. In the opening promo package, Bruce Beck talks about how fighters are evolving into true mixed martial artists with wide-ranging skills. We also see a bit of an evolution into the UFC's production values, as this is easily the slickest intro yet, showing several previous champions, none of whom are fighting tonight. Speaking of production values, the guys in the truck botch Beck's first lines, leaving his mic down. And once they crank it up, many English-speaking fans probably thought they had the wrong audio track, too.
Buenos noches todo el mundo. Soy Bruce Beck.
You know I don't speak Spanish. In English, please.
Tonight, we're being treated to a super fight between returning champ Ken Shamrock and the man they call the Hawaiian fighting legend, Kimo. The broadcast team explains two things. One, they're in Puerto Rico, and it's hot as hell in the building. And two, it's a mystery field in the tournament, as 7 of the 8 fighters are brand new to the UFC. But that's hardly the only mystery worth mentioning.
Chupacabra. It is a Puerto Rican mystery monster. They're boogeyman.
Okay, now that that's out of the way, we can dive right in. Unless you're wondering why the David versus Goliath format.
You cannot weigh your opponent when a guy comes in the street and tries to mug you.
Well, I mean, you could, but it might get a little awkward. Okay, time for the opening bout, where we get the UFC debut of the Predator, Don Frye. Don't let the image they chose, which looks like your overly opinionated uncle's Facebook profile pic, fool you. He's one of the toughest men to ever live, and even without a slingshot, this David won't go down easy against any Goliath. Beck does a good job of highlighting the important aspects ahead of the fight.
He is a Tom Selleck look-alike.
Despite those movie star good looks, the crowd isn't exactly in his corner. That's because his opponent is the hometown hero, Puerto Rico's own Thomas Ramirez, a 410-pound minivan with legs that boasts questionable stamina and a questionable record of 200-0 in challenge matches.
Says he's laid back and he likes fighting more than he does eating, but 410 pounds, I'm not sure if that really is a true statement.
Rich the G-Man Goins is back, and the then veteran voice of the Octagon is impressive with his command of the arena.
Our first competitor.
Always such a pro. Hey, maybe the heat's gotten to the G-Man early. And it's not like he's the only one out here messing up, though. In less time than it takes to turn your ring card right side out, the 200-fight win streak comes to a screeching halt. The Predator pops him on the button, and Ramirez tests the sturdiness of the cage. Since the fight had a 10-minute time limit but only went 10 seconds, the announcers are forced to tap dance a little bit and stall for time before it's time for fight number dos. The tournament's only returning fighter, Paul Varelans, is set to take on Brazilian prospect Joe Moreira. The polar bear looks even beefier than usual and has added an important element to his game: thinking. That'll come in handy when deciding whether or not it's worth taking a swing at his opponent. Their fight lasts a bit longer than the first one. They remain on their feet throughout, trading some hard shots as Moreira tries to stick and move, while Varelans slowly stalks the shorter fighter relentlessly. Don the Dragon Wilson wisely points out that he's pushing the action late in the fight, which is a good way to gain favor with the judges. And after 10 minutes, they give the win to the big man who opted for the shades in his profile pic too. Fight 3 pits Lion's Den protege, the slightly slight Jerry Bolander, who at just 21 years of age is up against 350-pound Scott FERROZZO, a man with an awesome custom-made robe and a preference for choking people on the ground, perhaps because he's jealous of those who actually have necks. Finally, we're about to see what the result would be if a shoot fighter fought a pit fighter, a question human beings have pondered since the dawn of time. Early on, it looks like Bolander fell into the habitat of a hippopotamus, and you'd assume he's seconds from tapping and GTFOing out of the UFC. But the undersized scrapper stands his ground. He gets some help when the fight is paused and restarted on their feet, but make no mistake, Bolander earns every bit of the submission win, turning the tables on FERROZZO late and using his singlet against him. FERROZZO becomes the first not in my backyard Facebook type to lose, while Big Daddy Gary Goodridge looks to return sunglasses picks to their former glory. He's up against Paul HERRERA, a wrestler of American heritage who paints beautiful imagery on the canvas of the Octagon with takedowns, but, fair warning, he may bleed, so bring band-aids. Beck explains Goodridge, a Kuk Sool Won practitioner, is a former Canadian super heavyweight boxing champion and apparently the greatest arm wrestler to ever lock him up.
Once beat 1,000 men in a row. I don't know about that. In 2 hours in Japan, in 2 hours?
Let's just take a quick break to do some math, shall we?
2 hours is equal to 7,200 seconds, which means on average he would have had to win each match in 7.2 seconds without stopping even for a sip of water or to talk some trash. Now if you assume it would take even just 2 seconds to get set for each match, Big Daddy is now down to only 5.2 seconds from whistle to whistle. Now his arms are pretty huge though, so perhaps he could have just slammed his way through each one immediately. But even if it is technically possible, where did these 1,000 people come from? Are they all arm wrestlers? Surely someone with any level of arm wrestling skill could have held on for at least a few heartbeats, especially if they were number 670 in line, let's say. And Goodridge was starting to fatigue. If one single decent competitor gave him a run for his money for even just 1 minute...
Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed.
Regardless of whether that's a true testament or not, no one can deny the ass-kicking he hands out to his first opponent. Goodridge had been training in Kuk Sool Won for an entire month and practicing defending against a fireman's carry for a whole day, and this is the result. One of the most iconic knockouts in UFC history takes place when Big Daddy ensnares HERRERA in a crucifix and shuts off his lights with a few shots that are necessary and a few more that certainly aren't. So the semis are ready to go, but poor Paul Varlands isn't. An injury has forced the polar bear out of the tournament, so in comes Sam Adkins, a massive boxer who sparred with the likes of Tommy Morrison and Riddick Bowe, not to mention...
He teaches boxer size.
Of course, it won't be easy getting past a man who has over 700 competition victories, as the G-Man announces, but doesn't elaborate on. Probably best to leave it vague if they're counting Yahtzee wins. But if anybody can do it, it's Sam the Experience Adkins, 6'3" and 270 pounds, and as mean as they come.
I'm here at the UFC to fight the best. I'll see you boys and girls in the Octagon.
Contrast that with this steely gaze from Fry as he beats up Andy Anderson on the beach, and it becomes crystal clear who's about to move on. The Predator scores an early takedown against the boxer who's out of his element on his back big time. Beck and Blotnick say he tapped, and while the Dragon indicates he isn't sure about that, McCarthy steps in to make the save anyway. Adkins is pissed, but still shows respect to the man who bested him on the night, and we're ready for another solid semifinal match. Jerry Bolander's been training with Shamrock Squad and is confident in his abilities. However, Gary Goodridge is, as the kids say, built different.
I've got it all, second to none. Big Daddy's bringing home the bacon.
I don't know. I'd probably trust him on that, but Bolander opts instead to fight him and find out the hard way. He backs Bolander up against the cage, yanks him off his feet with a guillotine choke, and other than getting reversed on the ground and winding up mounted, Big Daddy isn't ever in too much trouble. He powers out from the bottom and gets the stoppage after landing some stiff shots. Goodridge gives a post-fight interview where he indicates that in the final, if someone's better, they'll take him. Perhaps better isn't the perfect word for it. Just a less fatigued fighter would probably have a decent chance at this point. Being in a 5.5 minute long war with Bolander means he's going to be considerably more winded than Fry, whose 2 fights have provided him with 56 total seconds of Octagon experience. Not to mention, Big Daddy's been wearing a gi in an extremely hot Puerto Rican arena, which probably doesn't help the situation.
Whether or not it's a benefit, I'm not sure yet. But party at Rage in Barrie tomorrow night.
I mean, even the commentators have ditched their jackets. A good idea, fellas, since things are about to heat up. The long-awaited super fight between one of the most dominant fighters thus far in the UFC and a guy who lost his only fight and still celebrated. Say what you want about Chemo. I know I sure do. But at least he made sure the event finished strong with the sunglasses profile pics. After killing more than 10 minutes, the fighters make their way to the Octagon, and holy PEDs, Ken Shamrock is ripped. Chemo still looks like a beast, but next to Shamrock, it's clear he's another level. Although it's still a shame that at the time Calvin Klein didn't see the massive potential of a crossover marketing opportunity.
Shouts goes out to my man Calvin Klein, good looking out for the drawers. Now that could definitely come between me and my Calvins.
When Big John gives them the go-ahead, Chemo rushes Shamrock, who pops him on the chin and takes him down. Interestingly, he avoids taking mount and tries to get his back, clearly favoring the submission game over bare-knuckle ground and pound. Despite now working from the bottom, it isn't long before Ken gets a hold of a leg, which should signal the end is near. Blotnick opts not to increase the excitement though, downplaying the world's most dangerous man's dangerousness.
He's got the ankle. Shamrock's got Chemo's ankle. They get away.
Tell that to Chemo, who's forced to tap after trying to fight off the submission attempt for some time. It's a textbook ankle tragedy. Or is it?
Ankle lock.
Ankle lock.
It was a knee bar. What an ankle lock. It was a knee bar.
Now that that's settled, we're all set for the final fight, right?
Hey UFC fans, whether you're a martial arts expert or just someone who wants to learn the secrets of no-holds-barred fighting for the greats of the UFC,
or it's time to hawk this 5-tape set entitled Secrets of the Octagon. For just $59.95 each, or $200 for the whole shebang, you too can learn striking, submissions, escapes, takedowns, and conditioning from the best in the biz. You also get this sweet UFC cap, t-shirt, and poster. So what are you waiting for? Call the number on your screen right now. Now, I don't know about you, but as soon as I saw this, I wanted to drop everything, sit back, and just absorb all of the secrets of the Octagon. But alas, there's still work to be done.
Next time, baby.
While awaiting the final fight, the production team decides to cut to the tail end of a fight in the crowd. MMA lore has it that Tank Abbott picked a fight with Alan Goes, who'd allegedly bragged about submitting the pit fighter in a training session. There's also talk that Big John McCarthy himself went after the Tank after he'd said something insulting about John's wife, Elaine McCarthy, who was helping out at the show as well. Hard to confirm it all 25 years later, but basically anytime someone says Tank Abbott was acting like a dickhead, I say we believe them. Much like the broadcast team, Gary Goodridge has ditched a layer as well. Gone is the gi he was gifted in order to represent a school he'd spent a few weeks training and earning his 4th-degree black belt in. The Predator continues to have that look in his eye. The one that says no matter if I'm about to put someone into a temporary coma or have my own brains knocked out of my head, this is all fun for me. He goes into his 3rd fight of the night against a much bigger man with seemingly no hesitation whatsoever. He gets tossed around, even hangs off the cage for dear life, but when the opening is there, he pounces, laying in hard shots on Big Daddy and sealing the win. Severn is all smiles as his training partner reaches the upper echelon of the sport, just as he has. The Beast cornered the Predator, paying him back for his help at previous events. It's perhaps the UFC's first true bromance, and it all started with a kiss. Oh, kiss me. Goodridge keeps it classy, indicating he didn't have the stamina that was required, but also not taking anything away from his opponent.
Party at the Rage nightclub tomorrow night.
I guess that's where we take our leave? Nah, just kidding. Let's interview actor Chris Penn first, because why not? Shall we call it a night there? Oh no, let's go live to CompuServe's ETV Conference Room 2 Ultimate Fighting Championship and see what the fans are saying on the old internet. Beck attempts to get some questions to his broadcast partners, but in the mid-90s, it's a bit of an uphill battle for him.
I really can't understand because this is a total different language.
The resolution isn't exactly 8K, so it's tough to make out. But there's several questions asking where Royce Gracie is, if he's coming back, and why UFC 1 has already seemingly been swept under the rug. These hard-hitting cues get ignored, and instead they take on ones that help them get the point across that the UFC should be considered a legitimate combat sport. You see, just days before this event was set to take place, it was banned by the Puerto Rican government. And on a larger scale, Cablevision banned it as well, becoming the first major carrier to do so. Politicians were starting to get involved, like the late Senator John McCain, whose description of the UFC as human cockfighting helped stifle the growth of the sport temporarily and truthfully put it in danger of being shut down altogether. I'm sure the promoters were hoping that a well-run event, which for the most part it was, exciting and more importantly safe bouts, which they pretty much were, and the endorsement of the sport by notable figures, which Chris Penn I guess counts as, would go a long way in helping the UFC gain some credibility. The Dragon also gave his own solid endorsement that coming from him should have meant more to those who tried to ban the blossoming sport whilst giving boxing a pass.
You know, I was a kickboxer for 17 years, but I like this better because if you're going to have two men fight, let's have them fight and not give each other brain damage.
And if that didn't do the trick, this statement probably should have.
I was asked to be the judge of the Miss Hawaiian Tropic Bikini contest, and I turned it down to come to the UFC, and I thought I'd be disappointed, but you know what? This was better.
So there you have it. What an eventful night February 16th, 1996 was. Not that the UFC was getting stale, but the David and Goliath format added a new and interesting aspect to the sport. Sure, from the first time they put on an event, the idea was to show that a smaller fighter can overcome a much bigger adversary, but this time they put that theory to the test in every matchup and nearly every fight delivered, giving the incredibly supportive Puerto Rican fans their money's worth. A pretty crazy idea that paid off. Too bad we'll likely never see anything like it again, thanks to those pesky weight limits. So what did you think of UFC 8? Do you remember the days of the sport being forced off of cable systems and into the underground? Would you like to see a David versus Goliath style tournament these days? Did you find it weird that none of the fighters were even named David? Let me know in the comments section below. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already. That way you'll know when the next episode of A History of Caged Violence is out. And I will see you then. All the best.